Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Day 6 of Saints camp, and man, it seems like every single day there's just another name to add to the injury list. Thankfully, so far, none of them appear serious. That's the great news. Look, it's football, it's physical, guys are running around, and you're going to have nicks and bumps and bruises and injuries. It happens. You just want to make sure everybody's good for the start of the season. And you got a month between now and the start of the season, and some of these guys we're talking about probably weren't even going to be super active in preseason games, so just be ready to go for the start of the season. But when you continue to hear names like Kendre Miller and Brian Brzee and guys that you know you're going to count on, it gets a little concerning. Marshon Lattimore. Well, today you can add another one to the list as Chris Olave left the field after what was described sort of as an awkward fall. Here was Dennis Allen.
I think he just landed on his hip, but it's hip, and that's really about all I got right now.
So hip injury for Chris Olave. Hopefully nothing serious. It's so interesting, though, because whenever you do have a player leave camp, for whatever reason, right, injury or whatever, it does open up reps and opportunities for other players. So obviously with an injury to Nick Saldiveri at left guard, that's opened the door for Lucas Patrick really to feel like he's taken a hold at that left guard spot. With Marshon Lattimore out, huge opportunity for Kool-Aid McKinstry to take reps with the ones here early in camp. With Chris Olave out, everybody sort of bumps up on the wide receiver depth chart. And we don't know how long it's going to be. I'm not trying to overstate this. It's just sort of an open door to talk about the receiver room. And it's one where we have had an awful lot of intrigue because after Olave and Rashid Shaheed, what really do you have? I had a listener send me a message and said, hey, Matt, would you take over under 500 receiving yards for A.T. Perry and Bub Means combined? And I had to stop and think about it a bit because if you look a year ago, of course, Chris Olave was a 1,000-yard receiver. He had 1,123. After that, Rashid Shaheed went over 700 yards. And then Michael Thomas was your next leading receiver at 466. That's not of your wide receivers. Kamara was at 456. 466. Thomas was at 448. So, point is, your next leading receiver was Michael Thomas, sub 500. Do you think the combination of A.T. Perry and Bub Means could get over 500 yards? I'm pretty bullish on A.T. Perry. Like, I loved when they picked him, and I think he's got a really high ceiling, and he flashed late in the season last year, even in limited reps. A.T. Perry played in just 10 games for you. He was only targeted 18 times, but a dozen catches for 246. He averaged 20 and a half yards a reception. I don't think he would maintain that over the course of a full season, but the point is, yeah, I think if you double his targets, which is certainly reasonable, could you see A.T. Perry get over 500 yards receiving? Yeah, I do think that's possible. But how does this continue to play out with the receivers will be interesting, and other guys will obviously have more reps now with Chris Olave on the men. We'll follow that. Ross Jackson will be here in hour number 3. As he is all throughout Saints camp to give us our Saints camp reports. So we'll see if we do have any update when Ross is here in a couple of hours from right now. One other thing that was newsworthy today out of Saints camp. Coming into camp, one of the big stories was Alvin Kamara's contract. We've talked about it plenty here, and you know my feelings on it. Kamara is approaching 30. He's seen declining production the last 3 years. And he has no leverage. He's got zero guaranteed money on his deal for next year. If you're the Saints, there's no reason to jump into a deal when you don't have to. And if you remember, Kamara, when he met with reporters before camp, had this to say about his contract.
Just for me to set the record, I'm not asking for nothing. I'm not asking for nothing crazy where it's like, oh my gosh, we can't do that. Well, that's my perception of it. Whatever the perception is upstairs with whoever makes those decisions, it's obviously different than what my perception is. So, we just carry on. I got to just do what I do, not focus on what I got to do.
So for whatever it's worth, you heard Kamara say whoever upstairs makes that decision, meaning in the front office. Well, Mickey Loomis is the general manager, and Loomis gave an interview on SiriusXM NFL Radio where he did talk about the Kamara situation. Now, This is a bit of a long answer, but he starts by kind of giving some context around conversations like this with players and their contracts, and then punctuates the answer with a specific about Kamara.
Here's one thing that I've recognized over the years. Your contract, whether it's mine or yours or a player's, that's personal to them. And for the team or the business, it's business. And so we have to keep in mind that these are personal issues and they become emotional. And even though there's an agent in between, a lot of times you don't know, is the agent communicating it exactly the way you intended? And I'm not saying that they are or aren't. I'm just saying you don't know that. And so I try to keep that close to the vest and not discuss it. I let the players speak for themselves. And I thought, Alvin did a great job the other day. He wants to be with the Saints. That's who he wants to play for, and I appreciate that, and I want him to play for us. And I think eventually this will just work out.
That last line there, I think, is probably the one that's most important. I think eventually this will just work out. Now, there is a report from Albert Breer over at SI that the Saints have a contract on the table for Alvin Kamara. And that this sort of coincides with the words there from Mickey Loomis. Now, I can't help but wonder how long that contract has been on the table. And if there is, in fact, a contract on the table for Alvin Kamara, and Kamara hasn't agreed to it and is still waiting to see, or waiting to get that number that he says isn't outrageous, as you heard him say there, well, then you wonder, are the two sides just at an impasse? There have been notable situations like this with the New Orleans Saints, where the Saints have had their number. That is the line they won't cross. They dig in their heels, and that's it. A couple of very notable ones in recent memory were Mark Ingram, who, of course, Ingram and Kamara were a really good thunder and lightning 1-2 punch. And Ingram became a free agent, ended up signing with the Ravens, and we later learned that the deal that he ultimately got with the Ravens was only $200,000 more than what the Saints were offering. Like, for that amount of money, when you're talking about agents' fees and taxes, it's negligible. Like, he should have been a New Orleans Saint, but they hit an impasse. Same thing happened with Marcus Williams and the decision not to pay Trey Hendrickson. I mean, we've been down this road before, and the Saints have their number, and they don't go over it. And it's so odd because of how irresponsible they are with the way they structure deals. But when it comes to the actual dollar amounts of paying contracts, they have the value that they're willing to invest in a player, and that's it. So I wonder if they're at an impasse with Kamara. If they've offered that deal and Kamara still hasn't taken it, maybe the two sides' viewpoint of what is fair is far enough apart to where they don't get this done, at least not here during the season, or before the season. I'd love to see Alvin Kamara finish his career in the black and gold. But it has to make financial sense. You're not paying the player for what he's done. You're paying the player trying to project for what he will do over the life of that contract. It's hard to do with Alvin Kamara right now. See if you can stay healthy, have a really productive year, and then maybe the Saints extend it. Or maybe Kamara takes the deal that reportedly is on the table. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.